Salam, Namaste, Adab, and welcome to Indian Diaspora. Today's event is on nationalism and education, a very interesting subject, very wide subject, and very provocative itself because in recent past, this word nationalism and abuse of education was very much seen in many places, not only in India, in the West also. So let's see what Dr. Navneet Sharma today is going to tell about the nationalism and education. Dr. Navneet Sharma is an assistant professor in Department of Education, Central University, Himachal Pradesh. He will be formally introduced by Dr. Madhuri Sharma, who is an assistant professor in Department of History, Bharati College, University of Delhi. And the concluding remarks will be given by Professor Yashpal Singh, who is a professor in the Department of Education at Rohilkhand University in Bareilly, Uttar Pradesh. So welcome you all. And now I invite Dr. Madhuri Sharma for the formal introductory remarks. Thank you all. Madhuri ji.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. And very good evening to all those who are in India, and good morning to those who are in America. As we all know, today's our topic for deliberation is nation, nationalism, and education. So, in a mainstream, as we all know, nationalism, a kind of national consciousness to which all other forms of consciousness were assumed to have been subordinate. And not only this, there is also a kind of understanding that where nationalists assume the existence of a homogeneous kind of nation that supposedly spoke with one voice. So, with this understanding or definition, some questions come to our mind. That is, that should there be a kind of territorial boundary, a common tradition, culture, shared history, or a kind of shared identity, which further raises some kind of questions then how nationalism in India differs for Indians from the people who have their own kind of understanding for nationalism. Not only this, today's deliberation also further raises a kind of link that how education then helps in nation building and creation of a national feelings or sentiment. Does nationalism and education goes hand in hand? How Gandhi, Tagore, Bhagat Singh, Savarkar, Vivekanand, what was their idea of national, though differ from each other, but can they all be together accommodated in national education framework to instill nationalism among students? So today in this meeting, we are going to deliberate upon various ideas and strands of nationalism, nation, and its relationship or correlation with education. And we have an eminent subject expert, Dr. Navneet Sharma. Dr. Navneet Sharma is a faculty in Department of Education, Central University of Himachal Pradesh in India. He earned his master's degree in education, philosophy, and sociology. He earned his pre-doctoral and doctoral research from University of Delhi. His area of interest is of educational theory, social science education, science education, Dalit, marginalized groups, and gender studies. He has published around 3 dozen research articles in journals of international repute. He is also a constant contributor in various journals such as Mainstream, Outlook, Hindi, and Outlook in Hindi, and all other leading dailies in English and Hindi, like Hindu, the Indian Express, the Telegraph, Jansatta, Rashtriya Sahara, Navbharat Times, and many more. He has more than a ton newspaper articles to his credit. Before joining to Central University of Himachal Pradesh, he has taught at Department of Education, Delhi University, and Lady Shri Ram College for Women in Delhi University. And at present, he is also a special invitee member of Karnataka State Education Policy Commission. So I request Dr. Navneet Sharma to take to the fore and deliberate upon this, to take this deliberation further. So over to Dr. Navneet.
Thank you, Madhuri. Shukriya, Rajiuddin Saab, for providing us this platform. I always dread this idea of introduction, and if the deliberation doesn't sound meaningful enough or impressive, it is akin to Uchi Dukan Fika Pakwan, like much cry and little wool. So I always dread this kind of introducing the speaker. So I'll pick the threads from where Madhuri has left, and some more questions, and we'll go back to this idea that is it necessary and natural to have a nation? Is it necessary and natural to have a nation? Can we imagine a nationless world? How natural it is, like how much it is natural for a civilization to arrive at the idea of nation, from a guild, from a tribe, from a clan, from a village, from a town, city, to nation. Well, is that natural that any civilizational movement or process will gradually evolve into the idea of nation? How and when we got the idea of nation state, uh, how do we understand how and when we got the idea of nationalism, and when being committed to nation or state became a virtue as a nationalism? When did it become a virtue? Why it became a value? When patriotism and being patriotic became a value? And similarly, this will lead to another kind of question, that can education, can value be taught? Can value be taught? Can nationalism be taught? Can patriotism be taught? Can nationalism be instilled into the people, like we wish to instill scientific temper, like we wish to instill secularism, like we wish to instill honesty? So is that the value that we can think of? That So I'll divide my deliberation into three large domains. And in the first one, I'll talk about what does it mean to have a nation? When did we got the idea of nation and the nation state? And what is nationalism? And last piece of the puzzle will be that where we'll try to look about that, can schooling, can education talk about nationalism? So that's how we'll proceed. And uh, beginning with the very first idea. What is nation? What is nation? Is it a social construct? Is that the people started living together and they started developing association, and gradually from guild, tribe, village, town, we evolved to the idea of a nation? Is it a political construct? Is nation a political construct? Is nation a geographical construct? Or is nation a cultural instinct construct? So what is this construct? What is this concept of nation? So largely we agree to this idea that nation is a modern construct. When I'm saying modern, I'm referring to a time frame where we see the journey of civilization into certain phases. And this modernity we associate with the idea of 18th century, 17th century. Like every discipline may have a different time frame to talk about it. Like modern history will begin around somewhere at 17th century, whereas modern philosophy begins around 15th century. So there may be a variation, there may be a different conceptual idea of every discipline where they see modernity and modern as different constructs, but we are taking nation as a modern idea. And along with this, that we'll also look at that the idea of Hindustan, or the idea of India, or the idea of Bharat, that what we have as a nation, and what we are doing about teaching nationalism and teaching about patriotism. So historically looking at if you look at the idea of India, and when I'm saying India, I'm taking a vantage point, I'm taking a point of departure where I'm taking the India of 15th August 1947. So this India, the geography of this India, the states, the union territories, the nation state of India which got its political freedom from colonialism and the political freedom, and to recall Nehru, at the midnight hour when we reclaimed our destiny. So I'm taking that idea of India on 15th August 1947. Like the India which we get at 15th August 1947, historically, it can be a controversial observation, but many historians have talked about it, that there was no such India. There was no such India during ancient times. There was no such India during the medieval times. There were many smaller states or janpadas, or as the terminologies went on, which fought with each other. And the geography and the boundary and the idea of India changed every moment, within a kingdom it changed, within a reign of a king it changed. For example, it is said that the Mauryan Empire was one of the largest territorial boundary which got that idea of India, and Mauryan Empire extended till Afghanistan. But then probably it did not include northeast states. It did not had Arunachal Pradesh, it did not had Mizoram, Manipur, Meghalaya, or far southern like Chol kingdoms. They were not the part of the modern empire. Or similarly, even in the medieval India, the idea of India as a sultanate never evolved in that manner. Like Delhi Sultanate had different boundaries. Mughal kings had different boundaries. Even during the same Mughal king, the boundaries of their empire changed. And we had Rajputana, we had Khiljis, we have Turkis, we have Sayyids, we had Lodhis, and every empire had different geographical boundary. So it can be said that the idea of nationalism and the idea of nation and the idea of nation state in India started evolving in 19th century. We may not love to give the due credit to the colonialism, but let the devil has its own pie. And this colonialism brought that idea into that concrete shape, and that concrete shape started evolving when Britishers or when Portuguese started coming, and they started binding the whole landmass into an idea of India. Of course, there are different observations, and like when we say that the idea of nation in 19th century, we associate that idea of nation to the idea of nation state. It was colonialism which started converging India as a nation into a nation state. Before that, one may argue that we had these kinds of Jambu Dvipe Bharat Khande. So Bharat was always a nation. No, but that was a civilizational state. Whenever there is a debate between India as a political state and India as a civilizational state, or India as a cultural state, the nation may have existed in the idea, the nation may have existed in the minds of the people, the nation may have existed in the associations that people have developed along with kinship with each other. But the idea of India as a nation state started evolving in 19th century. So when we say India as a nation, probably we have this understanding of subcontinental civilization. We talk about the Southeast Asia. So when we say India as a state, and probably still the votaries of Akhand Bharat, they still believe that the idea of India as a subcontinent, as a nation of cultural engagements across the boundaries of Himalayas, across the boundaries of Ravi, across the boundaries of Deccan Plateau. So going back to again to look at that, how do we understand this idea of nation? Like when Franklin wrote about nation, or when Franklin quotes Stalin about nation, he says that nation is not a casual idea. It's not that casual idea that people started living together and that's how it evolved as a nation. No, there is a historicity behind it, there is a history behind it. There is some common language, there is some common culture, there is some common economic engagement, which evolves with a psychological makeup. And that's how the idea of nation evolved. But Stalin and this idea of nation was always controversial, where we had this idea of sameness. And the sameness, for example, Switzerland has three national languages, whereas the people who speak Arabic language, they are divided into many states and many nations. So common language can't be the criteria, common race can't be the criteria, common religion can't be the criteria. So this was the idea. There can be a unitary idea, there can be a unitary idea of sameness. So, but probably what is the common idea of all the nations evolving is that how would you differentiate your own nation from another nation? So the idea of nation required a category of the other. So we had the idea of India when we had the idea of the other. And in this case, these others were the whites. They were the Europeans, they were Portuguese, they were the other. So the idea of the other is very important in the idea of the nation, where you deliberate upon this, that if we go by a philosophical stance, nation is a priori. A priori in the sense that nation is given to you before experience. Like it's a Kantian phrase. It's a Kantian phrase where it says that you have the idea of nation as a priori. It is given to you. You infer the idea of nation while we are being schooled, while we are being socialized. We infer the idea of nation. We don't we may not experience the idea of nation before we evolve an idea of nation, because that is by inference. Inference is one of the method of knowing, where we all individual infer that how we evolve this idea of nation. So this idea of nation is quite different from a non-state controlling concept. Look, on the first hand, to have an idea of nation, you need to have an enemy. You need to have an idea of the other. If you did not have the idea, look, whether you call it first war of independence, whether you call it mutiny, or whether you call it freedom struggle, you need to get it from someone. And from this someone, you had the idea that this is the enemy. This is the enemy from whom we have to fight. And like as Nivedita Menon has written, that nation is almost every day's opinion. Nation is not a static block that you make a nation and you arrive at this idea. And nation is something, there is a beautiful word in Urdu language which we call Rai Shumari. So nation is a Rai Shumari. Nation is an attempt to make opinion, craft opinion almost every day. So this is what we understand with the idea of nation. Now moving on to the another block which we call as nationalism. To understand nationalism, we generally divide it into two frames, which we call as pre-modern or classic idea of nationalism and the modern idea of nationalism. So, like Cohen says that nationalism is a state of mind. Nationalism is an idea. Nationalism is an emotion. So this emotion is very different. And nationalism is also an awareness. And this awareness unifies us. And this unification of awareness is something like people have defined nationalism as a group activity. You don't do nationalism individually. You do always nationalism as a group activity. So, and nationalism as an emotion to evolve, as an idea to evolve, needs this concept of nation state. Why? Why we need this concept of nation state? Because that gives us another impetus and another idea which is called as sovereignty. So sovereignty is another important strand. If there is no sovereignty, if there is no samprabhuta, if there is no sovereignty, probably the idea of nation will not work that way. But then, of course, this nationalism had some observations which were like quite opposite to the idea. And the most uh, prominent idea was of Tagore. Tagore said that nationalism is probably the most powerful idea which humans have evolved, but it is the most harmful and most ugly idea. So when Tagore talks about nationalism, it's very different. Like why Tagore would have said that? We when we are looking at the idea of history, probably you'll see that why this nationalism did not existed earlier. Like in feudal world, in feudal world, there was much difference between farmers and vassals. The serfdom and vassals had so much distance that there was no common ground. There was no common ground to nationalism to evolve. And still, people believe that nationalism is something which is like random and sporadic. You may not be nationalist at all, and all of a sudden, if there is an India Pakistan match, you become a nationalist. So it's a sporadic also. Like it grows randomly also. So, like nationalism also creates nations. It is not necessary that the nation precedes the idea of nationalism. It is the nationalism also which can create the idea of nation. And probably it was the nationalism which created the idea of nation. And then it went on to create the idea of economic nationalism. And it further evolved into imperialism. The idea of gold, glory, and God, the glory of the nation and glory to the king. So that economic nationalism took over the idea of this nation and nationalism. So there are many questions which are still not answered in black and white. Like, what is the relationship between nation, culture, and capital? Is there a difference between Eastern and Western nationalism? And moreover, is the idea of nation a progressive idea or is it a regressive idea? Can religion be a basis to make a nation? So, probably when we say this about nation, probably we have a specific geography in mind, we have nationality in mind, and with this specific geography and nationality, we need to have an agency. We needed to have an agency which would repeat this idea every day. And as I observed earlier, and as Menon and other people have observed, that nationalism is a process of opinion making which goes on every day. And like when Miller observed that a good newspaper in dialogue with itself is also a nation to me. So probably when we have this understanding, so there is a specific geography, there is a nationality. So we needed an agency which would do this opinion making every day and which would socialize people about this. And what better agency could be than the school? So school comes in between there. So the state needed to legitimize itself. The idea of nation state needed to legitimize itself. The nation needed to construct and craft it every day. Like when we say that nation is a process of being and becoming. There is no ideal definition of nation. Nation is always in a situation of a flux. So it's always so dynamic that it's becoming every day. It's evolving every day. It is getting deconstructing every day. It is getting recrafted every day. So when all these things are going on, then we needed an agency where we could see that there is something called as a school which does this. And moreover, when in 20th century, when we had geographies which were like very multicultural, multilingual, multi-religious, multi-plural, multiracial. So there would have been, and there are internal incongruencies between these ideas of nation. So who would iron out these incongruencies? Who would do that work of breeding a common ground for these? So again, what we get is the idea of school. But as it is said that schooling is uh, schooling does not exist in vacuum. कितना time हो? So schooling doesn't exist in vacuum. Uh, it does not exist in vacuum, and the idea that I'm trying to breed out in this idea that there are external pressures, like every school and every system of schooling has a political economy. Every school, like every society, has its own concept of a school. And as it is said that every nation has certain aims and objectives. And to realize those aims and objectives, like Indian Constitution made certain aims and objectives. In 1950, we gave ourselves certain objectives. We gave ourselves certain aims. Like when you'll talk about a school, and you'll talk about a school in different eras, like when if we go back 100 years ago, and if we see schooling which was happening during the onslaught of colonization, we can find three strands, like three strands before pre-independent India. Like there was this urge for revivalism, there was this urge for revivalism of going back to Vedas, or there was this idea of Hindu revivalism, there was this idea of Islamic revivalism, and they had their own emphasis on the idea of schooling, that what kind of schooling the future or the next generation needs to be brought into. And then probably we had another strand which had the idea of indigenization of education. And indigenization of education worked via Gandhi, via Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, via Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya. So this was there was an attempt between revivalists, and there was an attempt between the indigenization of the education. And also, of course, there was another major block of schooling which started evolving, which came via white rulers, which also created its own kind of citizens. When Macaulay wrote that we need people who are brown in skin and English in thought, probably this idea of schooling, which started making the idea of, and probably this was required. I'm not saying, but probably when you read the idea of equality, liberty, and fraternity, then you started struggling about these ideas. So English may be a queen's language, and English may be the language which we all dread, and English may be the language which is given its due hangover in still the present contemporary India. But it was the knowledge of the English which brought certain ideas to the subcontinent, which brought certain different ideologies to the subcontinent. It brought a different fresh wave of idea of nation state to the idea of subcontinent. So like when we had revivalists, when we had the people who were trying to indigenize education, and then we had certain the phrase which is loved by both, like when the far right and far left, they talk about the English educated people, they have this very lovely phrase which we say that is the Macaulayization of the education. So we liberals get tormented with the idea that we are the Macaulay Putras. So we are the sons of the Macaulay. So probably there was this idea which was working there, and all of them were trying to make good citizens. So good according to them was very different. What a good citizen according to a revivalist will be very different from someone good coming out of Nai Talim. A good coming out of Banaras Hindu University, a good citizen coming out of Aligarh Muslim University, a good coming out of Dayanand Anglo Vedic College will be very different. A good coming out of the Sherwood School will be very different. A good coming out of we have recently, Furqan Saab and I have recently written on this, divide them young. How schooling divides us young. So we wrote in Deccan Herald that how different types of schooling still exist. So you'll be amazed that in this idea of like, it can be another important question that we are trying to instill nationalism into our people, but our people are divided. Forget about caste, class, creed, sexuality, gender, race, religion, language. The new divisions are being created by schools. Like there are 2,500 schools in India which are like super elite. They are the boarding schools where the fee structure can give challenge to any school in Europe also. So we have some schools which are like we in our piece we call them brahmanas of the schooling system. So these brahmans of schooling system, they had their own different kind of genre. So then we, even within a government school system, you have central schools, you have Sarvodaya schools, then you have municipal schools. A central school is remarkably different and infrastructurally, and the way its recruitment and the facilities are provided to a central school student or an army school student or a navy school student is very different from someone who is being educated in a school run by their state governments. So the central government schools and state government schools are very different. Within a state, there you can find there are different bags. Like municipal schools are more worse situation than the state government schools. So within that, there is a different clubs and categories of people going to these schools, and then probably the private schools also don't belong to the same infrastructure. There are private schools which are being run in 2 rooms, and then there are private schools which have this air-conditioned buses and air-conditioned classrooms. So private, public, or the elite schools, within them there are different very ranges. So what I am saying that these, and look at the schools on the other side. There are schools which are run by Agrawal Samaj. There are schools which are run by Christian missionaries. There are schools run by madrasas, or there are different minority groups which are running their school. There are different majority groups which are running their school. There are single sex schools. There are co-ed schools. And if you look at the variety of schools in India, you'll be amazed that probably it reflects the mosaic of the floor, which we want to label as nation, national, and nationalism. So that nationalism would evolve very differently in a Shishu Bharati school, in a madrasa school, in a public school, in a private school. So what kind of kinship and association a child of central school will make? I'm only taking an example, like don't go by these. Like what kind of association a school from municipal managed school will make with a student who is learning at Delhi Public School, or someone who is learning at Mayo College, or someone who is learning at Rashtriya Indian Military College, or someone who is learning at Shishu Bharati, or someone who is going to a madrasa. How these differently divided people will associate with each other with their different ideas of nation and nationalism, that is something which is like a challenge to any nation and any national policy in making. Like, so school don't work in vacuum. There are always external pressures. There is contemporaneity of the times. Like every time, and probably I don't know about other countries, but every time there is a change in the government, there is a fierce debate about what kind of history, which history, what format of history needs to be taught. So that contemporaneity also contributes to our understanding. So, and probably the idea of good citizen and good society. So when these divisions are existing, again we go back to the understanding what Weber thought of nation. Weber says that there is a geography and there is a state who has got the hegemony over physical violence and validity. It is the physical violence by the state, where the state has the hegemony, who could be hung till death, who can be terminated. And when you are doing violence on the name of the state, whether and wherever, whether it's at the boundary, whether it's at the border, whether as a police, whether as an army, whether, so there is a physical violence which has, where the state has the hegemony and validity. So this is something like, when we think of nation state and nation in these terms, what Krishna Kumar writes is like, the idea of nationalism and nation comes from two words, and these are very common words which we associate, like these people. Like when we use this idea of these people, for example, going back to the colonial understanding, and when we hail that colonialism to creating an steel infrastructure of bureaucracy, which we call IAS, IPS, and the steel infrastructure of bureaucracy which manages. So from the viceroy to the Amin to the Patwari. So Patwari or the Amin and the local official of the village is somehow linearly connected to the viceroy. So this also gave us an idea of nation and nationalism. So when we had this idea of uh, uh, these people, so when you train to become a bureaucrat, or when you train to become a part of the state, you are somehow an intermediary between the nation and the people. So there is an intervention. So these are the intermediaries: bureaucracy, legislature, judiciary. So when we say these people, so there is a smaller percentage. There is a smaller percentage which somehow governs us, and then there is a larger number of people who live in that nation. So when I said that we infer nation and nationalism, so that inference comes from these acts. So like, and like, when we say that nation state is something which claims to be eternal, whereas nation as an idea is something which is in flux, which changes every day, which needed opinion making every day. So what nation state did, that it made schools to reproduce the idea of nation and nationalism. So uh, like, if you think of, probably it was the Warner's book in 1899, which was the first book which is known as Citizen of India. So it had these kinds, this is probably the first civics books. Now we call civics as political science. So Warner wrote that book, Citizen of India. So probably, who am I? What are my rights? What are my duties? Who are my neighbors? How am I supposed to behave? How am I supposed to respond? How I'm going to go about the clarion call of going about. So we had this understanding, and this understanding had its own journey, and there were like resistance to the colonial understanding of education, which we can see, the ones like Raja Ram Mohan Roy, who belonged to the revivalists. And then we had people like Sir Syed Ahmad Khan and Madan Mohan Malviya, which had different understanding of education. Then probably we had Gandhi and Tagore, which was altogether very different. And then, of course, there was resistance to this idea. And there was a time when the call was given that don't go to school, don't go to colleges. And these schools and colleges, and probably it was for the first time it was said that the school and colleges are the subsystems of the nation state of the Britishers. So don't go to them. Don't go to them, otherwise you'll become corrupt and you won't become patriot. And probably if you'll go to school, you'll become a toady bacha. So probably this was the understanding which came upon. And then post independence, when we the Indian constitution, so probably when Mudaliar commission, the first commission which came post independence, and when we had probably the idea of democracy which was taking birth, and probably the democracy which had the burden to evolve itself. And when Mudaliar commission writes that democracy doesn't means anything unless we can give dignity to everyone. So that dignity is something which is the common strand of democracy, that every individual, every citizen, look, it is not about living, and there are many judgments which says that it's not about living, but living with dignity. So probably living with dignity was somehow associated with this idea that when you will be schooled, probably there will be a socialization of yours, that what kind of India you will live into, what kind of citizen you are being expected to be. Look, if we gave ourselves this idea of socialist, secular, democratic, sovereign republic, then when we talked about liberty, equality of justice, and these ideals and ideas we gave upon ourselves as nation, probably these are the ideas which evolved the concept of nationalism, though it began with having an enemy as the white enemy. But then it moved on, like when Bhagat Singh, and on 23rd March, and if we are talking about nationalism and nation, we can't have any complete idea and understanding of nation and nationalism if we don't talk about two people. One, of course, is Bhagat Singh, and another is Ambedkar. So Bhagat Singh, when Bhagat Singh writes about nation and nationalism, he says that nation means having a country which must be free of oppression. So when you have a country free of oppression, some people may say that it is moving towards a socialist nation. But no, when Bhagat Singh was, though he read a lot about Buckman and Lenin and Trotsky, and Bhagat Singh's idea were influenced by Marxist understanding. But this is how the idea of nation would evolve. Look, to have an association, to have an emotion, to have a feeling for the nation, you need to be living in oppression free society. If you are being oppressed in the name of caste, in the name of sexuality, in the name of creed, in the name of color, in the name of language, probably you may not feel that kind of association with that nation. And probably this is what the internal inconsistencies are which evolve in a multicultural, multi-plural society. So how in a multicultural, multi-plural society, a nation, the idea of nation will evolve? Probably we need to have a nation, a society at a time where there is no one who is oppressor and there is no one who is getting oppressed. And probably like, and of course, Ambedkar goes on to write about these in his many books. Like when he says that why we can't feel kinship with Savarna Hindus, because probably there is a distance. If you, and he writes it at a place, though Indian subcontinent has a different understanding. Like when Islam came to Indian subcontinent, or Sikhism, or even Christianity and Buddhism, they adapted the idea of caste. They took the idea of caste, and there are castes and subcastes within Islam, within Christianity. Casteism is something. But when Ambedkar is writing, he says, when you go and ask a Mussalman that who are you, then he'll say that I am a Muslim. And if you'll go and ask the same question to a Christian, Jew, or Parsi, they'll say that we are Christian, Jew, and Parsi. But when you go and ask a Hindu that who are you, then he'll probably, or she'll probably say that I am Pandit, Teli, Chamar, Bangi, or n number of other castes. And that's why we are not able to develop kinship and the association. If there are certain national institutions, national spaces, public spaces which are inaccessible to certain group of people, then probably how they'll evolve that idea of association with the larger commune. And probably it is the understanding that community and family may not teach you about nation and nationalism. And that's wherein the school will come in. And the school will teach you about something, I don't know if there can be an umbrella term like national history. The school will teach you the national history. The school will socialize you into the idea of national history. And this history will have the legitimacy and the backing of the state. And that's how the NCRT and SCRT textbooks get revised every time that there is a change in the government. And probably this socialization into the idea of nation and nationalism is something which is given in the school. So family may give you the idea of being member of a family. Commune may give you the idea of being a member of the commune. But it is the school which gives you the idea of nationality. Without the idea of nationality, probably both nation and nationalism as a concept will not survive. And probably it is the national identity which is evolved through schools and education. I'm not saying that those who don't go to schools don't have national identity. They have. But there is something which is called as legitimacy. There is something which is called validity. There is something which is called reliability. So probably this understanding, so idea of nation and nationalism, moving from मिस्टर रोम यूना सब मिट गए जहां से कुछ दम है कि हस्ती मिटती नहीं हमारी. The idea of this eternalness seeks its validity, its legitimacy through the textbooks, through the school, through the education. And that is what creates the worst quagmire. That in a scenario like this, where you have challenge from every now and the other moment, where the idiot box, which Baudrillard called it TV, the idiot box, and the blue lunar lights, and he gives a very poetical imagination. When this blue lunar lights emerging from this TV has entered our bedrooms and drawing rooms, the legitimate knowledge doesn't come from the textbooks and the schools. It's rather coming from TV. And in our times, it's coming from the WhatsApp. So how to counter the idea of WhatsApp knowledge? How to counter the idea of knowledge which is being given at the television? So this is one of the challenges that education system needs to answer. So there is a kind of cacophonies which are being created by the politics of the state. Like, I wrote a piece on Kashmir, Carpe Diem, the present and future of Kashmir. Like, if there is no Kashmir, probably the manifestos of Pakistan and India will have a blank page. So Kashmir defines the idea of nation and nationalism, which Kashmiris may themselves contest. But this is something which is like, you need that kind of understanding. So, as a evolving nation, we also need to be aware is that our idea of enemy is shifting from whites to someone else. Is that our ideas of enemy shifted from, like, whites are now far off, so we go to our neighboring countries. So people who don't have as facial expressions like us, they are the other. Chinese have smaller eyes. They don't look like us. They are the other. Pakistanis are definitely the other. And definitely the idea of nationalism to survive and get created, then you have 20 crores of Pakistanis within the country. So probably this idea of creating and crafting nationalism is something which is very much political. But if school and education believes in the process of being and becoming, needs to provide a solid understanding of nation and nationalist identity, probably the philosophical understanding of nation and nationalism needs to shift its grounds from creating and crafting the idea of the other. So probably this is what I wanted to say about nation, nationalism, and education. And will, of course, go ahead with more deliberations with the questions which will come.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Wonderful, Navneet Saab. Wonderful. It was very, like, stirring the pond, we all taken into that. And it was really, very inspiring and very challenging also. So let us hear Professor Yashpal Singh, and after that we will go to question and answer. Yashpal Saab, आप हैं कहीं? भैया
Yes, I am here. Yes, I am here.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We are waiting for you.
I am stopping the car somewhere. And,
Okay.
then, first of all, greetings to all of you. And then thanks from my side for giving me this opportunity to provide some concluding remarks on this wonderful lecture by Dr. Navneet ji. Actually, the topic of this talk, nation, nationalism, and education, is very relevant and trending right now. For such a thought-provoking and inspiring deliberation. In the times of global citizenships, we are facing pseudo-national prides. And nationalism is being equated to patriotism in many ways. Navneet has very rightly pointed out the role of education in recent times in bringing about this notion of nation among our future generations, among our children. And I think the very pertinent question he raised in the very beginning, that the teaching of values is the idea of nation and nation.
सर आपकी आवाज नहीं आ रही है.
Like to mention here is the diversity with regards to types of schools running in our country, which has been very smartly addressed by Navneet ji. That is very important point to consider for all of us.
Uh,
equity
are,
and inclusion.
are,
And for
are
that,
you still driving? If you can stop by side or somewhere, only then you can effectively deliver it. It becomes troubling, we cannot hear.
Probably his connection also has gone awry.
Yeah, it looks like, To do then.
He dropped.
He dropped. So what I'll suggest, Rajiv,
I think we can go to question answer session. And if he joins, he can become part of that question answer. That is the only thing we can do. Before we move on to that, just an announcement for the coming week. As you know, we are very diverse on different topics. And so at the end of every month, we have Danish Iqbal, the very famous Danish Iqbal from Jamia. He is coming this time. Since it is a month of Ramadan, he cannot go very much in the Bollywood or any other thing. So he has picked up poets of other faiths in the poetic tradition of Nath Goi. So he has picked up two Hindu poets of Urdu literature, Tilak Raj Paras and Uddhav Mahajan Biswal, in this tradition. And so over to Dr. Rafat Hussain for question answer session. Rafat? Rafat? All right, so let me take over. Sorry, Rafat, for some reason.
I'm sorry, I think I don't know the networks for some reason.
शर्मा वो
I will not.
यशपाल जी, वो आपका नेटवर्क अभी भी वही
Am I audible?
सिचुएशन में है, सिचुएशन वही है आपकी, तो वो डिस्टर्बिंग
Oh,
रहेगा.
actually, I think
दैट्स ओके, वो डिस्टर्बिंग रहेगा.
नहीं,
तो
मैंने गाड़ी तो रोक ली है.
तो अगर आप कंटिन्यू करना चाहें तो इट्स अप टू यू, बट द मोमेंट यू फील यू कैन स्टॉप एंड वी कैन start the question and answer session.
Okay, better you start the channel. If somewhere I think that the work is good, then I will try to put my
Okay,
ideas.
that's fine. That's fine. We can move on to question and answer session. Rafat, are you
Okay, thank you.
still here? It's okay. So Rafat is not responding. So anyone who has any question, please raise your hand or raise your physical hand if you cannot use your digital hand. Though the lecture was really very, very informative, very challenging. So I presume that there should be much more
There are
questions.
some questions in the chat.
Huh?
There are some questions in the chat. You may want to
Some
do that.
question. Okay,
Yeah.
first let me invite Victor Beg, Victor Ghalib Beg sahab. Please be brief in your question. Yeah. Ji, unmute yourself. Unmute yourself, please. You can
Thank you very much, Razi Saab, for your incredible forum. And I want to thank Dr. Navneet Sharma for his excellent presentation. I always learn a lot when I am on this. My question was, what's the role of religion in nationalism? Now we hear of the Hindu Rashtra, the Jewish state, Islamic state, all sorts of. What's the connection? That's my simple question. Thank you.
I'll just very quickly just try to shed some light on that idea that very short the story that there was this person whose nose somehow got severed, and he started looking towards the sky, and they started blabbering certain things. So when people asked him that what are you doing, he said that I have got a contact with the God. I have established a contact with the God. So other people ask that how you have seen God. It is invisible to us. So he said it is not that easy. You have to get your nose cut. Then only you can see the God.
Your nose cut.
So there were always the few experimenters. They said we'll get our nose severed and let's establish a contact with the God. So they got their nose severed and they said that there is no God. And then this person said that now your nose is already severed. If you don't say that there is God, people will think that you are a fool. So no one wants to be a black sheep. Like there was a point in 1995, I'll take that example and then from there I'll go to the idea of two-nation theory. There was a point in 1995 when all of a sudden Ganesha started drinking milk. So if anyone went to the temple and said that no, it is not drinking, then everyone else claimed that since you are a sinner, that is why from your hand it is not drinking. So no one wants to be get acknowledged as a sinner. So everyone said that yes, it is happening. In psychology, we call it as Burnham-Forer effect. So this Burnham-Forer effect works. So probably religion as an association of an idea, it evolved that all those who pray with closed hands, all those who pray with their open hands, they started believing in certain do's and don'ts. So when they started believing in certain do's and don'ts, it was somehow believed that they will make a nation. But as the speed of circulation increased, speed of circulation of humans and human ideas both. Look, you could have a religious state when you rode on the horse. But since you have got motorbike, you can't have a religious nation. So the speed of circulation of humans and human ideas have grown beyond speed and limits. So in these times, you can't, when you can see the live telecast of aeroplanes going into the WTC, you can't have this idea of religious or a nation based on religion because they are very far and wide, but still both of them are affecting each other. Their idea of the other is 5,000 kilometers away. So you have got intercontinental ballistic missiles. So these intercontinental ballistic missiles, like one of the piece that I wrote recently in Hindi was also, if there are 800 million people on the planet, then probably we produce 1600 million bullets every year. So when these bullets are produced, they have to be consumed and they have to have customers. And what is a better customer than nation and nationalism? If there are no fights between certain nations and nationalism, the domestic violence of nation can't consume 1600 million bullets. So you need to have fights. So in these times, religion cannot define the idea of nation. It is also other factors which are also defining the idea of nation. Probably you will see that there are fights of nations following the same religion.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma, and I'm sorry that I had a technical difficulty to join you. So those who are interested to ask the question, they can also raise the digital hand. So let's, Razi bhai, the Som Krishnan question was addressed or no?
No. Please go
Okay.
ahead. There are more in chat.
Yeah, I see that.
All
Thank
right.
you. So what should be this is from Som Krishnan or Krishan. What should be the criteria and way to teach nationalism in different schools when different ideology has their own influence?
So look, again, my understanding, like, but how would I would see that? Can we teach nationalism in the school? Or is that the larger, like, for example, scientific temper, the example that I took. Scientific temper is one of the directive principles in the Indian Constitution. But if largely the society and the milieu outside the school is unscientific, the scientific temper cannot be instilled within the boundaries or the classroom. Similarly, the idea of nationalism, and that's what I said, schooling has to address this idea of WhatsApp knowledge. Schooling has to address this idea that when there are multiple understandings of nation and nationalism are floating around, and can it be taught and should it be taught, whether it is required and desirable are two different things. How would you see someone growing as a universal citizen? How Tagore would have answered this question? Tagore would have said that I don't see that my school would have any boundaries of nation and nationalism. And probably Shanti Niketan, when he thought about that idea of school and schooling, he did not give nationalism that course in that curriculum and the syllabus. So that understanding that do we need to teach nationalism? Or if it is an emotion and feeling, should it not evolve automatically? Sure, there can't be a separate lesson on nationalism. Nationalism is something which is taught via mathematics and biology also. It is not the responsibility of social sciences only. So you can't have nationalism is not the tadka that you splinter it over the dal that now our school curriculum is a nationalist one. So I don't know whether we can teach nationalism or not. But of course, we can teach about nationality. We can teach about nation. We can teach about shared history and shared cultural beliefs. And I believe that it will lead to, like when Razi Saab was telling about this Nath and Nathologies, and which will be the next Saturday. When you read Rahi Masoom Raza, and when Rahi Masoom Raza talks about nation and nationalism, there is no separate chapter on in any of his novels. But while reading Rahi Masoom Raza, you get this feeling that there is something which needs to be associated with, need to be felt along with. So I don't know whether we can teach nationalism or not.
Thank you. So the next is from Shrikant Saab. And origin of modern nation state is thought to be from Treaty of Westphalia in 1650. The world is ruled and organized as community of nations. Do you see any other model which may de-emphasize the current concept of nationhood and be possibly less contentious?
Quite complex question, but I think that look, we have one example where we had this understanding which was more of economic, but economic nationalism also has started guiding our understanding. And when I said that, can we imagine a nationless world? Can we have a world where there are no nations? Probably we had this idea of European Union, where this union is there. There are many institutions which talk about regional cooperation, like SARC. NATO and CETO were the ones, those were the two groupings during the Cold War. And these were the two groupings which were like based on the idea of nationalism and nation and the idea of the other. But probably we can have some groupings. We can have some groupings, but I think the idea of nation as a geographical concept has reached to a level that we're imagining a nationless world will be a very difficult idea. No one would be eager to give an inch. And probably this is the control over every inch. And the commerce of weapon industry, the commerce of weapon industry will collapse. And weapon industry will never want this idea to evolve that we can have nationless world. So,
Thank you. So next question is from Pradeep Borthakur. What are the roles of diversified gender, including LGBTQIA plus, in nation building process? Tough.
I don't know. I've always taken this understanding that there are certain categories which needed to be studied, like different in sociology, different in history, and different in political science. It's like asking a question that do LGBTs also brush their teeth? Look, every citizen, irrespective of sexuality, homosexuality, heterosexuality, but yes, there is an understanding which I would love to talk about, that nationalism and patriotism has taken its some strands from heteronormativity. There's this idea of heteronormativity where you see your nation as father, as mother, and there is a defined masculinity or femininity which is assigned to the idea of nation. So motherland or fatherland are the two boundaries. Oh, sorry. Fatherland and motherland are the two binaries. Again, fatherland and motherland are the binaries of heteronormativity, which are being taken up by nation and nationalism. So LGBT and IQA people have this role to bring in this idea that this world doesn't goes by heteronormativity. Heteronormativity and heteronormative understanding of nation and nationalism will cater to the weapon industry. But probably the nations of LGBTIQA, that nation will have that kind of flexibility and will have kind of that rainbow shade, which will be all inclusive.
Thank
So
you.
probably this role is to be performed by them.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma. And the next question is from Vikas Kumar. Why it is necessary to teach nationalism in some Indian school curriculum? I know you have partially answered that, but please take on again.
Look, and that's what we have talked about also, that when India as a nation became nation state, the state needed an agency to reproduce the process of becoming and being a nation. So when nation state wanted to claim that eternality, that of a nation, there was the only one agency which could do that. And when I said that being a nation is a process of opinion making almost every day, so this opinion making is to be done at the schools. And that is why it is necessary to teach nationalism in some Indian schools and in schools. Look, what I am saying, that there are 2 or 3 or multiple sources of values. And these multiple sources of values are always contested ones. But there is something which we call as constitutional value. So nation state gives us a constitutional value. and we have all agreed to abide by it. Whether you agree with any constitutional value or not, but you have agreed to abide by it unless until there is some revulsion to any constitutional value. So until they are the constitutional values, they are to be the part of the curriculum and syllabus.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma. So next question is from Mir Wasim. Whether the extreme nationalism is a threat to international peace and tranquility, as it may lead to jingoism, should the states move from idea of nationalism to the idea of internationalism? And there is another question, related question from Madhuri Sharma. In this era of global citizenship, do we need nationalism over humanism? So they are related questions, you can address in one.
So I am missing that question in the chat box.
Okay, let me read again. This is from Mir Wasim.
Hmm.
Whether the extreme nationalism is a threat to international tranquility.
I don't know whether we can have these kinds of shades: mild nationalism, moderate nationalism, extreme nationalism, gravest nationalism. Look, there can be nationalism, there can be religious nationalism, there can be political nationalism, there can be economic nationalism. But saying that there are shades like mild, moderate, and extreme nationalism is something which doesn't go with it. And look, any idea of nationalism, until the idea of nation will exist, there will always be a threat to the world peace. Because one nation, look, in the very concept of the nation, how would you differentiate yourself from the another? How would you differentiate yourself from the another nation? And till the other exists, till the another exists, there will always be a threat. Or if there won't be a threat, it will be created, constructed, and crafted. So till nationalism is there, there will be always a possibility of jingoism and threat to world peace. And global citizenship. Like, I still don't see, if we look at the number of people, for example, the kind of inequality which is rising, and not only in India, across the world, the inequalities which are rising won't evolve that kind of nationalism. For example, when I talked about the feudal world, when we had the huge distance between farmers and vassals, so the kind of inequality, like the recent today's Hindu reported that 1% of Indians control 91% of wealth in India. And if this is the kind of inequality which is growing, and the 1%, even it is said that 800 families of the world control 87 of the GDP of the 87% GDP of the world. So if you believe that a hungry person from Sub-Sahara, or a hungry person from Kalaandi, or a hungry person from Balochistan, or a hungry child from Gaza will aspire for global citizenship, that's still a difficult dream. I don't see these people talking about global citizenship. Internet may have binded us. Informations have traveled across the planet. But there are certain things which are still the basic needs. And until these basic needs are fulfilled, I still believe that global citizenship is an idea which is like floated by a neoliberal economic order by multinational companies and transnational companies. So when I said that the question to explore is whether there is a relationship between nation culture and capitalism. Probably we need to understand when Linda Nicholson wrote this very prolific essay, Postmodernism or the Late Logic of Capitalism. So we need to see this gimmick of global citizenship.
Thank you. How about the nationalism and humanism? That's a question from Madhuri Sharma.
Look, I don't know, Tagore's humanism will always be in contradiction to any nationalism. Anyone's humanism, if you start seeing the other as the human, as the someone with the same genealogical structure, with the same blood group, with the same kind of blood, flesh and bones, if you see all these things in commonality, probably you will not fight, but you will keep fighting for the sake of, look, when humans see themselves, there has this desire of identity. If there is no concept of nation and nationalism, probably we will fight with other people because of the size of their nose. वो कुछ लंबी नाक वाले लोग कुछ छोटे नाक वाले लोगों से लड़ते रहेंगे. The conflict will be there if it is not in the name of nation and nationalism. So I don't see humanism like you may see that I'm painting a very depressing picture, but these conflicts and the notions of identity will exist.
Yeah.
And we'll find one or the another reason to fight with each other.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma. Another question is from Surinder Agrawal Saab. Why can't country considered as a neutral concept, or you can say they adopt as a neutral concept to identify themselves rather than emotional concept of nation, which is a mental construct and produces conflict, unrest, and divisiveness?
Look, the idea of nation, like country is a geographical idea, if you say that, but the idea of nation is a political and a social and a cultural understanding. Country can't be a neutral idea. Like when country will come in, there will be the idea of territory. And the moment territory will come, there will always be a question. Whose territory? How much of territory? What extent of territory? Who will rule within that territory? So the moment the territory will come, the physical land space will come, no country can remain neutral. There is no division. It is not division like those two rooms belong to you and these two rooms belong to us. And even if you do that kind of division, there will always be this instinct that let's encroach these two rooms also, those two rooms also. So country can't be a neutral idea because country is an idea which evolved very late in the course of civilization. We started living like a guild. We started living like a tribe. We started living like a clan. And country is an idea which evolved very lately. It can't be neutral. And once, like when John Dewey wrote about it, and now once you are aware of what country is, you can't undo it. There can't be any Rawlsian idea of veil of ignorance. Now, when Rawls says that democracy will survive only when we have veil of ignorance, so there can't be a Rawlsian approach of veil of ignorance which is given upon all countries. Let them forget that they belong to India. Let them forget that they are Pakistan. Let them forget that they are Syria. Let them forget that they are Philistine. Let them forget that they are America and Russia. Can we be neutral? And is it desirable and expected of? That's also a question.
Thank you. So,
Can I say I will say in a globalizing context, the country is more relevant today. The concept country which you are saying was a long historical concept. The boundaries were not defined and gradually they become firm. And now we know that we are a country, we are not changing our boundaries. So in a globalizing context, I will say that less conflicting is the notion of country by which we identify ourselves rather than, as I said before, in a conflict way that we in the nation are divided on language, on religion, on caste and political systems and so on. We keep on fighting on that. But when we say that, okay, I belong to India, that's it. And then a national identity on the basis of nationalism. That I find a little bit confusing in the present scenario, in the present global context. That's my question.
can you please identify yourself? Surinder Agarwal sir, who was that?
And please.
I don't see on the screen.
I'm Surinder Agarwal.
Thank you.
I retired from University of Delhi as a geographer and now living in Maryland.
Okay, thank you. So, Sharma ji.
That's a very complex question, but yes, that's what we can ponder over. But probably look, what we feel associated with, even in these global times. For example, if there is any company, if there is any industrial organization, for example, if it makes to New York State Exchange, for example, if any country gets, if any company gets listed in New York State Exchange, we still celebrate. Oh, the Indian got listed in this. And when Forbes releases the 500 richest people of the world, and if there are 10 Indians, we still feel that association. Look, we have got this idea. So that idea of sense of pride and the sense of emotionality will always exist. So even if there is this idea of global citizenship, like the example that we can take latest is from this pre-wedding of Ambani's son. If there is an international artist like Rihanna and coming and performing there, still people look for nationalist stance in that. And that nationalist stance was taken. Look, now Ambani can make Rihanna dance to the tunes. And when Rihanna said that India is a poor country, now it is a big slap on her understanding of India as a poor country. So these kinds of notions will always exist. Look, countries can't be neutral. Country as a concept cannot be a neutral idea. Because the moment you will have a territory, the moment you will have someone to associate with, then probably these emotionalities will work in. I don't see countries as a neutral concept.
Thank you. Thank you, Sharma ji. Anamika from the chat box. Not chat box. You raise a digital hand. Please go ahead. I ask you to unmute.
Hi, thank you for this insightful presentation, Dr. Sharma. You talked about a very complex and controversial topic very eloquently. I have two questions from you. How do you think nation and nationalism should be looked at in the educational institutions like schools and also in the broader social construct? Like, should it be seen as an inheritance from the past, like something that is given to us by previous generation, or should it be seen as something that will be constructed in the present and the future? So, is nation something natural or man-made? What do you think are the implications of teaching either of the two perspectives to children? And my second question is, who do you think sovereignty should lie with? the space, that is the land, or the people residing in this space? Because nationalism is consistently, it insists on the idea of sacredization of the land. So how far do you agree with this practice, and how do you think education can foster this idea that the dignity of the nation and its citizen, especially those belonging to disadvantaged and marginalized group, how their dignity can coexist?
Mm. So, very complex questions. Let's take the first one. Um, Look, when we talked about nation and nationalism, I said that going by the Kantian ideas, nation and nationalism are the concepts which are like a priori. They are given to you before you experience them. You are born into a nation. You are born into a nationalist setting, and you infer by the method of knowing of inference that we belong to this, we belong to that, and by that idea of expansion rule, you arrive at this idea of nation and nationalism. So probably nation is a construct which is pre-given. So now the question is that it is not only about inheritance. So like you can't ask a pinpoint date that since when we started inheriting this idea, because it was always a dynamic idea and it started evolving and it's always in the process of being and becoming. So we simultaneously inherit it also, but we construct it also every day in our classrooms, every day in our pedagogies, every day in our understanding. So this is something which goes on simultaneously. So this question that whether nationalism is a natural construct or man-made construct, of course, there can be two answers. One answer comes from the idea of creationism. Creationism, where you believe that this world is a created effect, so there must be a creator. So there must be a creator. The Christ made the country, the Brahma made the country, or the Pagambar made the country. So there was a creator and who made this country. And of course, there is another understanding which belongs to the understanding of evolutionism, that there was a big bang and probably gradually this understanding of guild, tribe, clan, commune, and the nation evolved. So there can always be different answers from the different departure points, from the different ideologies. Look, I may want you to believe into my nation. I'll take an example. You would see this idea when there were these people who would go along with a drum to make announcements, what we call as munadi. There were people who went from one state to another to announce the certain rules and regulations which are enacted by the king. So they would say, खल्क खुदा का, मुल्क बादशाह का, और हुक्म कंपनी बहादुर का. So the idea is that this is the hukm of Company Bahadur, that is the British. The country belongs to the Mughals, still it belongs to the Badshah. And Khalq Khuda ka, this world belongs to Khuda. So if you don't follow the rule by the company sergeant or Bahadur, you are violating the rule of the Khuda. So king was always seen as manifestation, and nation state were always seen as the manifestation of the god. So there is always some mata which is associated with the idea of nation and state. There is this idea of fatherland. So there can be multiple answers. It depends that from which departure point you are taking your understanding of nation and nationalism, and different schools within India. When I talked about the different schools and different management systems, central government schools take it from different departure point. The schools which are being managed by missionaries take it from different departure points. The schools being guided by different ideologies take it from different departure points. So it depends that in what kind of a school and a schooling you are getting a school. And the next question is that sovereignty lies with who? With the people or with the land? Look, you can't imagine a nation without the land also and without people also. Land and people are somehow like inhabitants and a habitat. You can't separate them. You can't say that 50% of sovereignty will lie with the habitat and 50% of the sovereignty will lie with the inhabitants. There can't be that kind of division. Like, if you believe habitats, certain habitats, like there is a Himalaya one side, there is sea on three sides, you somehow craft that idea of habitat. And all those people living from Himalayas to Sindhu are the inhabitants of this landmass. Then probably this is not applicable to many nation and nation states in Central Asia, in Europe, in America, North America, or within South America. There are no geographical boundaries always which define the idea of inhabitants and habitats. So sovereignty can't be decided by mountains, rivers, and the people living by them.
Thank you. So another question is from Sanjogita. What strategies can be employed to ensure that nationalist education does not lead to exclusion or marginalization of certain groups?
Look, it primarily goes to say that your idea of nation and nationalism need to be such far and wide that it sounds inclusive rather than sounding exclusive. But the problem with the concept of nation and nationalism is that it is always in search of the other. And it will always look for some the other. Without this the other, you can't have the idea of nation and nationalism, and these other will always be excluded. Whether your exclusion goes by caste, religion, gender, sexuality, color of the skin, or by the looks of and size of the eye, then probably you will always have this idea of the other. Otherwise, how will you differentiate your nation from other nations? So nationalist education, certain epithets don't get associated well with the idea of education. Like, education is education. There can't be any education, though despite some regime may say that these institutions are giving anti-national education. But no institution can give anti-national education. Either it can be a nationalist education or it can be education. But no education, like they have their own different understanding of nation. They might be catering to the idea and discourse of education of their own understanding. So once nationalist education, for example, my nationalist education will always be an anti-nationalist education to my neighboring country. And their nationalist education, Krishna Kumar's work, please refer to that my country and your, oh, I am forgetting the name of this. I'll ask one of my scholar to say that about. Mera Desh Tumhara Desh is one of the work by Krishna Kumar, which is in Hindi, and there is an English version also of this text. So my nationalist education will be considered anti-nationalist across 400 kilometers only. And their education is considered as anti-national education to Indian education. So nationalist education is a very problematic idea, at least to some. It will always be anti-national.
Thank you so much. And that was the last question. And thank you again, Dr. Sharma, and Dr. Madhuri Sharma and Professor Singh. And Dr. Sharma, it was really a well-researched talk and learned response to all the questions and comments. You did a wonderful job. So, and now I pass on to Dr. Raziuddin.
Thank you. Now I see a last minute hand.
Oh, I say Abdul
Dr.
Jabbar.
Abdul Jabbar.
Yeah.
Please be brief, Jabbar Sahab.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
You are on mute.
You don't want to say that anyway. So
I asked.
Okay, now I got it. Okay, thank you. So
Okay.
I think it's about I sent a lot of things, articles on the chat. So one of the things about Macaulay conception or racial superiority, that's what you just kind of talked about a little bit. How the colonial kind of spill into the nation building, those kind of stuff. So are we then replaced Macaulayan conception of racial superiority by the local, the Indian politicians or the political systems, the exclusion of other religious conception, other cultural conception. So it's not the anti-nationalistic, maybe exclusionary tactics. So that, can you kind of comment on that a little bit?
It's again a very academic insight. Before I go on to talk about this question, I remembered that work which I was suggesting by Krishna Kumar, that is Pride and Prejudice. It's a comparative analysis of how history is taught in India and Pakistan. So that's a very wonderful book to look at. And the idea which Jabbar Sahab is talking about. Look, Macaulay had his own compulsions, had his own contemporaneity, had his own empire to cater to. But what has happened is that when Macaulay said false history, false language, false science, we haven't moved much ahead. The recent policy document has also made a similar observation. It says that Sanskrit has as much text which Latin and Greek don't have. So responding to Macaulay is not being anti-Macaulay. So what and how nations respond to each other. That when Macaulay said that there is only one good shelf which can accommodate all Indian literature, and now the recent policy says that only one good shelf can accommodate Latin and Greek. So this is not how you live. But that is the problem with the idea of nation and nationalism. So whenever these ideas of nation and nationalism will be there will be certain idea of pride, there will be a certain idea of appropriateness, there will be always a certain idea of me being more upright, my nation being more upright, which will always prevail. So that will always work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
So,
Okay.
Naveen sir, yeah, anybody else?
No, something from you now.
Oh, okay, sorry. My one question or comment is, you so far told us about understanding of nationalism, etc., through schooling. But in that India, or even in Indian subcontinent, including Pakistan and Bangladesh, a big population lives in just simple villages. They are villager. They are not all go to school. They are very, just simple villagers. but they have very strong concept of, like, in a Indian village. I'm from UP. In UP Indian village, you go, they have a very strong sense of India. कि हम तो भारतीय, हम तो हिंदुस्तानी हैं. They have a whatever level of concept, they're very, very clear in that, and they hold to it. So what happens to that elaborate elite and the casual school which teaches nationalism? How they, when those visit these villagers, because everyone, whether live in Himachal or Delhi, has roots in some villages. So suppose they visit once to their poor relatives, and they find them very Indian, but very distinctly different. Maybe it says that maybe a lot of villagers are not really communal. They are very secular, living side by side. Most of the more educated in cosmopolitan cities, who are more refined, are quite poisonous to the other. What is this? What is this? Is education teaching them, becoming more urbane teaching them? What are these things that they teach, which a villager seems to be totally clean of? I mean, this poison, this separatedness, the other, the enemy, or the hatred, it is not that much seen in the common ordinary villagers. So how, and both are nationalists, or both are Indian national, or nation they believe into. How do you explain this as a teacher or as an educator?
Oh, quite a complex question, Razi Saab. But yes, it reminded me of many complex ideas, which, like, I'll go back to quoting Rahim Asum Raza again. Rahim Asum Raza, through one of the character, asks this question, and it's about partition of India. And when partition of India happened, so there was this person within the local police station who was known as Jamadar, because Thanedar was earlier known as Jamadar because he was the one who collected all those lavaris vastus and had a control on all the property and all the things which people left when they fled from India to Pakistan and Pakistan to India. So this Jamadar was very important. So when we moved, so there is a beautiful line कि हिंदी में कहता हूँ फिर बाद में अंग्रेजी में, कि अब मैं अपना हक में हर जमादार से मांगू, अल्लाह ताला से मांगू, पाकिस्तान से मांगू, किससे मांगू, क्योंकि शौहर तो उधर चले गए. इसी तरह मैं अब अपने बेटे को कहाँ से ढूंढ कर लाऊं, जमादार के पास जाऊं, अल्लाह ताला से मांगू या पाकिस्तान से. So in a very poignant manner, how this idea of nation and nationalism goes into our deeper understanding. So when we become nationalist and when we evolve this association and kinship with a landmass, is something which is a psychological process, can be overwhelming sometimes, can be such in a non-current manner. You may never realize that when you became a nationalist, like when we read Manto, when we read Rahim Asum Raza, when we read Krishna Sokti or Bhishma San, we don't know when we are becoming nationalist. And the next question that you asked, that probably it is the education and schooling which is making atmosphere more vitriolic and more venomous. It is more the literate people probably yes, when DV wrote that education also makes you cunning. Schooling also gives you an identity where you say that you are distinctly different from the another. So when education gives you an identity of belonging to a particular state or belonging to a particular nation, it starts telling you your difference by pointing out the difference. And that's why probably the first lesson we teach to our students is to differentiate between the Pakistani flag and the Indian flag. Even before you know that what is Pakistan and India, you know how to bow and when to bow and in front of what flag to bow. So if someone who is bowing to another flag, another anthem, so through these symbols and signages of significance, which schooling instills in us, we create and craft different identities for us. These different symbols and insignias of significance may not be available to the local villager, may not have reached to that common Indian or common Pakistani or a common Nepalese or a Sinhalese. So their idea of nation still believes कि यहाँ से वहाँ तक, from here to there. His understanding of citizenship surpasses boundaries. And so probably they are less corrupt. They are less.
Sorry, but I think the common, take a village, a village inhabiting Muslims, Hindus, and different even caste. They all are very aware of their selves. Like, I am a Yadav, I'm Hindu. He is a Muslim, he is a Nai, or he is a Sheikh. So they are very aware of their identities, yet they don't harbor so much enmities or division as the far more educated, far more knowledgeable, those same kind of Yadav or Sheikh or Brahmins living in the good places of India or elsewhere. Why? Even in England, North and South division, or the upper and the lower, you will see this division. So is this that education inherently, though creating more knowledge into you, making you more sophisticated, but also robbing you from your humanity?
No, I would see it as a different understanding. Look, education expands your horizon. So what happens if you see the contemporary times? If you want to create a nationalist and a wave and nationalism as a moot point, then probably you ask others to forget their local identities. Forget your caste that you are Nai or Dhobi, now you are a Hindu. Forget that you are a Pashmanda or you are a Sheikh, now you are a Muslim. So your nation comes in danger. So it's like expanding your horizon. So your horizon is expanded by education, where you lose your more locus to your located individualized identity. So education takes you from Greater Kailash Welfare Association to a citizen of India. So this is an expansion.
Is
So
it good for 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 peaceful living, for more cohabitation?
It can be good if you don't stop at the Wagha border. It can be good if you don't stop by the Gaza Patti.
Yeah, that's true.
So
Yeah.
your expansiveness is very necessary. Look, Tagore's idea of education would be like that. It should not stop you to the boundaries. Na?
So why not teach maybe the early era saints and yogis or whatever sadhus, or the people who used to be teacher, all knowledgeable, one teacher, teaching the pupil many things: mathematics, astronomy, thoughts, philosophy, humanity also. Maybe the teaching process is not that good, that they are giving you more knowledge, but they are not giving you the critical knowledge, very much needed for a plural setting. There was no effort ever made to to in to put together the feelings and heritage of all to become a very healthy, knowledgeable society.
The only word that I had more apprehension about when you used word critical. Look,
Critical.
nationalism is an ideology. And the moment you become critical and start asking questions, you are no more an ideologue. It's like religion.
Yeah.
Either you follow it or you don't follow it. You don't ask questions about it. So the moment you ask a question about religion, you are now irreligious. You are now an atheist. Now you are someone else. So it belongs to the same idea of nation. Either you follow it or you don't follow it. And look, much of the history can't be undone. We had so many wars. We had so many world wars. If you will teach all these Pir Murid saints and local mathematics and local knowledge, then what you will do with those 18,000 nuclear bombs? You have those 18,000 nuclear bombs and you have to legitimize their existence. So you need Japan, you need America, you need India, you need Pakistan, you need Syria, you need Lebanon, you need you need Ukraine.
Yeah.
So it's a commerce also. Nationalism is more of a commerce rather than so.
All right.
I
All right.
may be sounding very
No, 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 no,
defensive.
no. That's okay. It says, it's these issues are they need much more bigger panel and discussion and over and over. It's not so, but nonetheless, it was really very fruitful, probably very informative, very good session. I'll say very educational session. It went, the only regret is not having Professor Yashpal Singh. He was really, he tried very much, but he tried very hard. He couldn't.
There was some exigency, there was some emergency in his family, so he had to travel somewhere.
Okay. So otherwise, it was a very well attended. And remember, this month of Ramadan, a lot from our audience, because of their observance, they it clashes the time in India, especially 8:30 clashes for them. But otherwise, it was very, very well attended. A lot of questions came. Everybody got benefited. So thank you very much, all the participants, speakers especially. Probably we will again touch base with that and maybe again invite you for some later months for some another
There's a
talk.
last question, Razi Saab, can we take
Yeah,
it?
yeah, yeah. It is.
There's a last question, and there is some Vikram Sharma who has asked this question. What about national anthem and unity of nation people? Look, I'm not against having a national anthem. This is one of the signs which we need to associate with. I have the only problem when there is this WhatsApp circulation that United Nations has claimed that Indian national anthem is the best national anthem of the world.
That's a WhatsApp university. Yeah, that
So,
can do
so
anything.
like it's not Indian Idol which is going on in United Nations. No, it is not comparing different anthems. And who is doing that?
Nobody knows.
Look, having an anthem, having a symbol, having a signage, having some दिले दिले दराफ्त को कोई तो मतलब ठीक है, you need some icon, you need someone to dedicate something to devote something to. That's perfectly fine. That's perfectly fine to have a flag, anthem to die for. But to have an anthem and a flag to kill someone only for that is something which is a problematic
आप
idea.
आप शायद बॉलीवुड के ऊपर भी एक कोई टॉपिक था आपका करने वाले थे किसी टाइम में,
जी,
तो लेट्स save it for the other
let's
session
save it for the June session.
or the unfortunately, yeah, June, July in a latter part, yes. Yeah, that will be interesting, Bollywood role in this thing.
Popular Muslim
yeah,
narratives and
let's
Indian Bollywood.
yeah, let's now stop here. It's over
Thank
2 hours.
Sharma ji, it was a pleasure listening to you.
Yeah.
शुक्रिया.
Wonderful.
बहुत अच्छी तरह से डिलीवरी हुई, बहुत अच्छा.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
It
everyone.
was really a wonderful
Very
session.
impressive. Yeah.
Thank you.
I wonder what you will do with the Bollywood, when you come.
Yeah.
धन्यवाद.
I mean, yeah, you said that, how about Bollywood? Okay, yes, of course.
Yeah, and Razi bhai invite Asim Saab for introduction or.
I mean, Professor Asim Siddiqui from Aligarh, he's
He's also-
also very much tuned into cinema. He teaches cinema in English literature at Aligarh. Yeah, that is one of the subjects they introduced, and he is teaching use of cinema. That's a part of their English literature courses. Yeah. Okay. Thank you all. We'll see you.
Thank you.
Please
Thank you.
join next week. Next week will be very spiritual, what you call. It's a very, and literary. Basically, it is the literature part.